I never imagined I'd end up in a situation like this. It wasn't something I had ever planned or even thought about, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns. It all began on a typical afternoon, the kind that should have been forgotten without a second thought. But that day stuck with me. That day changed everything. The house was quiet, with just the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional chirp of birds outside. I had just finished tidying up the kitchen when I felt someone watching me, not in a passing way, but with a lingering intent. When I turned around, there he was, standing in the doorway, my stepson, Tyler. Tyler had always been polite and respectful, the kind of young man who held doors open and said thank you without being prompted. But lately, there had been something different in the way he looked at me. At first, I brushed it off as nothing. He was 22, navigating that space between youth and full-fledged adulthood, still trying to find his place in the world. He'd always been close to his father, but ever since his dad had been travelling more for work, he'd spent more time around me. I didn't mind. I liked the company. But this was different. His gaze wasn't casual. It was direct, focused, as though he was trying to read me, waiting to see how I'd react. I felt a warmth rise in my chest, something unsettling yet thrilling at the same time. "Do you need something?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. "No, just thinking." Thinking about what? I could have asked, but I already knew the answer, and maybe, just maybe, a part of me wanted to hear it out loud. Instead, I turned back to the sink, focusing on the soapy water swirling down the drain. Dinner that evening was uneventful, or at least it should have been. The television played in the background while I sat across from Tyler at the dining table. I asked him about his classes, his plans for the summer. He answered, but there was something in his voice, a slight edge that wasn't usually there. I felt it in the way he watched me, like he was waiting for something and opening up. Later that night, after I had gone upstairs, I heard a knock at my bedroom door. It was late, too late for casual conversation. I hesitated before opening it, my breath catching slightly when I saw him standing there. He looked like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how to start. He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know what I'm doing." Neither did I. But I knew we were standing on the edge of something, a line we weren't supposed to cross, but one that was starting to blur. "Tyler," I said carefully, "this isn't—" "I know," he cut in, "but that doesn't change anything, does it?" His words hung between us, heavy and charged. I should have stepped back, shut the door, put an end to whatever was happening before it started. But instead, I stayed where I was, watching him, waiting. "Good night," he finally said, his voice quieter now, like he had reached some silent conclusion. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my pulse unsteady. I closed the door, but sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the look in his eyes, the tension in his voice. It was wrong. It was dangerous. It was something I should never have let happen. And yet, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. I woke up the next morning feeling like I had barely slept at all. The night before had played over and over in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something irreversible had shifted between us. I went about my morning routine as normally as I could, hoping that if I pretended nothing had happened, it would simply dissolve into the past. But when I walked downstairs and saw Tyler in the kitchen, I knew I had been wrong. He was leaning against the counter, a coffee mug in his hands, watching me with the same intensity I had felt the night before. "Morning," he said casually, as if nothing had changed. "Morning," I echoed, forcing a smile. I kept my movements deliberate as I poured myself a cup of coffee, careful not to look at him for too long. If I gave him too much, if I let him see the thoughts swirling inside me, I wasn't sure I'd be able to take them back. I sat at the table hoping that maybe if I kept my distance, the tension would fade, but Tyler didn't leave. Instead, he sat across from me, taking slow sips of his coffee. "You didn't sleep much," he finally said. I looked up sharply, my heart skipping a beat. "What makes you say that? I could hear you moving around. You were up late." He was watching me again, that same searching look that made my stomach tighten. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my voice light. Just had trouble settling down, I guess. Nothing unusual. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned forward, setting his mug down. Was it because of me? There it was, the question I had been dreading. The one that would pull me further into this dangerous place if I wasn't careful. Tyler, I think we need to be careful here, I said, my voice steady despite the way my hands clenched in my lap. I know things feel different lately, but they don't just feel different, they are different, he interrupted. I know. I swallowed hard. That doesn't mean we have to act on it. He studied me for a long moment, and for the briefest second, I thought maybe that would be the end of it, that maybe he would nod, say he understood, and we could go back to the way things were before. But then, he stood up slowly, deliberately, and moved around the table toward me. My breath caught as he placed a hand on the back of my chair, his body close enough that I could feel his warmth. You don't really believe that, do you? He murmured. My heart pounded in my chest. I needed to stop this to get up and put distance between us, but I didn't move. I couldn't. He reached out, the barest brush of his fingers against my arm, and I felt the air in the room shift. Tyler, I breathed, my voice barely audible. He waited, his eyes locked on mine, waiting for me to give him permission, and for one terrifying, exhilarating moment, I wanted to. The sound of the front door opening shattered the moment. I jerked back just as my husband stepped into the house, setting his briefcase down with a sigh. "Hey, sweetheart," he called. "Sorry I got back so late. Traffic was awful." I stood up from my chair, my pulse racing. "You're home early?" He smiled and walked over to kiss my cheek, oblivious to the storm that had just been brewing in the room. "Meetings wrapped up quicker than expected. Thought I'd surprise you." "That's nice," I managed, forcing a smile. Tyler had moved away, his expression unreadable, but I could still feel the weight of what had almost happened between us. I had told myself it was nothing, that I wouldn't let this go any further. But now, standing there with my husband a few feet away, I knew deep down that it wasn't over, not even close. I spent the rest of that evening avoiding Tyler. Every time I caught his gaze, I felt like my husband would somehow see through me, as if the weight of what had almost happened was written across my face. I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending to be absorbed in chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, anything to keep my hands occupied. I could feel Tyler's presence in the room, the way he lingered, his attention never straying far from me. Dinner was a quiet affair. My husband, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air, was too busy talking about his meetings, the issues he had to deal with at work, his plans for the weekend. Tyler barely spoke, answering in short responses, his fork idly pushing food around his plate. I was no better. My mind was racing, my body tense, every nerve aware of his presence just across the table. After dinner, my husband settled into the couch, exhausted from his long day, flipping through channels on the television without much focus. I excused myself to the kitchen, pretending to clean up, but really just trying to gather my thoughts. The moment I was alone, I let out a slow breath, gripping the edge of the counter. I needed space, time, clarity, but I wasn't given any of those things. I felt him before I heard him. Tyler's presence was unmistakable, the subtle shift of energy in the room sending a shiver down my spine. I didn't turn, but I knew he was standing behind me. "We need to talk," he said softly. "Not now," I whispered back, my fingers tightening around the dish towel in my hands. Then, his voice low, persistent, and entirely too close, he said, "This can't happen." "It was a mistake. We need to forget about it," I said, my voice barely audible. "You don't believe that," he countered, stepping closer. "I see it in your eyes." I shut my eyes, willing myself to find the strength to push him away, to put an end to whatever this was before it went any further. But when I opened them and turned to face him, the words caught in my throat. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something deeper, something dangerous, a challenge. A noise from the living room made us both freeze. My husband laughed at something on the television, completely unaware of what was unfolding mere feet away from him. The spell broke and I exhaled shakily, stepping back. "Go to bed," I said firmly. "This conversation is over." He hesitated, his jaw tightening, but after a long moment he nodded. Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing up the stairs. I leaned against the counter, my pulse hammering. I had put an end to it. I had drawn a line. But deep down, I knew that line had already started to blur the moment I let myself entertain the thought of something more. The days that followed were filled with an unbearable tension. Tyler was always there, his presence a constant reminder of what had nearly happened. He didn't push. He didn't corner me again, but the silence between us was thick with unspoken words. My husband left for another business trip that Friday, kissing my cheek before heading out the door with his suitcase in hand. "Call me if you need anything," he said, smiling warmly. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I will. Be safe." The moment the door shut behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and then I felt it, the weight of someone watching me. I turned, and there he was, standing at the foot of the stairs. Tyler. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence stretched between us, filled with the unspeakable things neither of us dared to acknowledge out loud. I knew in that moment that I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't take back, and I didn't know if I wanted to stop myself from falling. The house felt different with my husband gone. It was quieter, the silence almost thick with anticipation. I knew Tyler was still in the house, but he hadn't said a word since my husband left that morning. The tension between us had only grown, unspoken yet undeniable, lurking in the air like an unseen force pulling me closer to something I knew I shouldn't want. I busied myself with mindless tasks, hoping that distractions would dull the thoughts creeping into my mind. I cleaned the counters, rearranged the spice rack, even folded laundry that didn't need folding. But nothing could stop my mind from drifting to him. The clock struck noon and I realized I hadn't seen Tyler all morning. Had he left? Was he avoiding me? A sense of relief mixed with disappointment settled in my chest. I shook my head, scolding myself for caring at all. I needed space, time to clear my head before I did something I couldn't take back. I made my way to the living room and sank onto the couch, hoping a little television would serve as a good distraction. But just as I reached for the remote, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I turned my head, and there he was. Tyler stood at the bottom step, watching me. He looked like he had been deep in thought, his hands resting on the banister as if debating whether to come closer. My pulse quickened. "You've been avoiding me," I said, immediately regretting the words. "I thought that's what you wanted," he replied, his voice even, unreadable. I swallowed hard. I don't know what's happening between us." He took a step forward, his expression calm but deliberate. "I think you do." I exhaled sharply, my hands tightening in my lap. "Tyler, this can't—" "Why not?" he interrupted, his voice quiet but firm, his eyes locked onto mine. "You keep pretending you don't feel it, but I see it. I feel it." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come because he was right. I felt it, and denying it only made it stronger. He took another step toward me, and I knew I should stand up, create distance, and put an end to whatever was happening before it spiraled further out of control. But I didn't move. "You're scared," he said, his voice softer now, "not because this is wrong, but because you don't know if you can stop yourself." My breath caught in my throat. "Tyler!" Before I could finish, he was standing in front of me, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. My pulse hammered in my chest. "I'm not going to do anything you don't want," he murmured, his gaze unwavering. "But you need to be honest with yourself." I closed my eyes, trying to push away the emotions swirling inside me. This wasn't just about temptation. It was about the undeniable connection that had been building between us, a connection I had tried so hard to ignore. When I opened my eyes, he was still watching me, waiting for my response, and I didn't know if I had the strength to give him the answer he deserved. The air between us remained thick with anticipation, neither of us speaking, neither of us daring to move. I could hear my own heartbeat, fast and insistent, thrumming against my ribs as if trying to warn me of what I already knew. I should have stepped back. I should have told him to leave, to forget whatever had been brewing between us. But instead I stayed, my breath shallow, my hands pressing against my thighs in an attempt to ground myself. Tyler was still watching me, waiting for something, permission, encouragement, a sign that I wanted this as much as he did. And that was the problem. I did, but want wasn't enough to make something right. I pushed myself to my feet, forcing a laugh that sounded more nervous than casual. "We're being ridiculous." His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't move back. "You don't believe that?" I swallowed hard. "Tyler, this isn't wrong." He cut me off before I could finish. "Because it doesn't feel wrong." I sucked in a breath, the words catching in my throat. It wasn't about whether it felt wrong. It was about the consequences, the weight of choices that could never be taken back. I shook my head. "It doesn't matter. We can't." He exhaled through his nose, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, didn't move, just studied me with a patience that made my stomach twist in knots. Then, as if coming to some decision, he stepped back. "Fine." I blinked. The space between us suddenly too much. He nodded, his gaze unreadable. "If you really believe that we should ignore this, that it's nothing, then I'll drop it. I won't bring it up again." Relief should have washed over me. I should have felt lighter, reassured that he was giving me an out, an escape from something I had no business entertaining, but all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest. I gave a slow nod, ignoring the disappointment curling in my stomach. "That's for the best." A flicker of something passed over his face, something I couldn't quite place. "Right." He turned then, walking toward the stairs without another word. I didn't stop him. I didn't call him back. I just stood there watching him disappear, feeling the weight of something unfinished pressing down on me. The house felt different after that. The silence between us wasn't just thick, it was impenetrable. Tyler kept his distance, not cold, not cruel, but distant enough that I felt the absence of his presence in every room. I told myself this was what I wanted, that this was the right choice. But every time I caught him looking at me from across the house, that same unreadable expression in his eyes, I wondered if right was the same thing as feasible. The days that followed were quiet too. Tyler kept his word. He didn't bring it up again, didn't push, didn't cross any lines. Yet the atmosphere between us stayed heavy, filled with all the things left unsaid. I should have felt relief, maybe even gratitude, that he had taken a step back. But instead I felt something else entirely, something that unsettled me far more than the guilt I had expected. I missed it. I missed the intensity of his gaze, the way he challenged me, the way he forced me to acknowledge what was happening instead of running from it. Without him in my space, the house felt emptier. The hours stretched too long and I found myself waiting for something I had already told myself could never happen. I threw myself into distractions. I went out more often, running errands that didn't need to be run, finding reasons to be anywhere but alone in the house with my thoughts. When I was home, I busied myself with chores, cooking elaborate meals that no one had asked for, anything to keep my hands and mind occupied. But nothing helped because no matter how much I tried to pretend otherwise, I knew the truth. I wanted him. And knowing that he had let go, that he had decided to stop pushing, didn't make it easier. It made it worse because now I was the one thinking about what if. I was the one fighting the urge to cross the line I had so firmly drawn. Late one evening, after I had spent the day avoiding him as much as he had been avoiding me, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I was in the kitchen washing dishes, trying to focus on the rhythmic sound of water instead of the restlessness coiling inside me. When I turned, he was there, standing in the doorway. I froze, gripping the edge of the sink. "Something wrong?" My voice was steady, but my pulse was racing. "Anything but no," he said, his expression unreadable. "Just thought maybe you were done avoiding me." I swallowed hard. "I'm not avoiding you." He arched a brow, clearly unconvinced. "Right. That's why you've barely said a word to me in days. I turned back to the sink, focusing on scrubbing the plate in my hand, even though it was already clean. I just think it's for the best. Do you? He stepped inside the kitchen, moving closer. Not too close, but close enough that I felt the heat of his presence. Because it sure doesn't look like you do. I turned off the faucet and exhaled slowly before facing him. Tyler, we agreed. No, he cut in smoothly. You agreed. I just didn't fight you on it. I pressed my lips together, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. Isn't that the same thing? Not even close. He studied me, his gaze slow and assessing. You want me to act like there's nothing here, but I know better. And so do you. A shiver ran down my spine, but I held firm. That doesn't mean we have to do anything about it. He took a step closer, close enough now that I could see the challenge in his eyes, the frustration just beneath the surface. Then why are you still standing here? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out because there was no answer that wouldn't unravel everything. He tilted his head slightly, waiting, giving me one last chance to push him away. But I didn't, and that was all the answer he needed. The moment stretched between us, neither of us moving, neither of us daring to breathe too hard. I could feel the weight of his stare, the way it settled on me, daring me to break first. And maybe I already had. Maybe I had been breaking for a while now, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the inevitable. I could have walked away. I could have pushed him back, ended the moment before it had a chance to take root. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath shallow, waiting for him to say something, anything that would force me to make a decision I wasn't ready to make. You don't want me to walk away, he finally said, his voice quiet but firm. I swallowed hard, my fingers curling around the edge of the counter. Tyler, this isn't... Don't say it's wrong, he interrupted. You don't believe that. I exhaled sharply, closing my eyes for a brief second. It doesn't matter what I believe, it matters what's right. He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking to almost nothing. And this feels wrong to you? I didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. It didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable, like something that had been coming for a long time, no matter how much I had tried to deny it. Then stop pretending, he murmured. His words sent a shiver down my spine. I could feel my resolve weakening, slipping through my fingers like sand. The air around us crackled with something electric, something dangerous, and I knew in that moment that whatever line we had drawn before no longer existed. Tell me to leave, he said, his voice softer. Now, I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to acknowledge what had been building between us, the tension, the stolen glances, the way my heart beat faster when he was near. It was all there, undeniable and impossible to ignore, but I couldn't say it. I couldn't tell him to leave because I didn't want him to, and that was all the answer he needed. I knew I had crossed the line the moment I didn't tell him to leave. The tension between us wasn't just lingering. It was suffocating, all-consuming, swallowing us whole before either of us could stop it. My heart pounded as I felt his presence, as close as it had ever been, yet still waiting, still giving me a chance to change my mind. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Tyler's breath was steady, his hands at his sides restrained. I could feel the heat radiating from him, my skin burning with the awareness that this was the moment where everything changed. I stepped back just enough for space to exist between us, but not enough for the tension to break. We can't come back from this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to. His answer was immediate. Sure. And the last thread of my resistance snapped. I had spent too long pretending, too long fighting against something that had already taken root. Every excuse, every logical reason why this shouldn't happen crumbled under the weight of the undeniable pull between us. I had convinced myself that avoiding him, ignoring the way he looked at me, would be enough to make it go away. but I had been lying to myself. Tyler closed the space between us, his fingers grazing my arm, his touch feather light, waiting for me to push him away. But I didn't. Instead, I tilted my head, my eyes searching his, knowing that the moment I moved, the moment I gave in, there was no turning back. And then I did. The world blurred, logic slipping through my fingers like water. And for the first time in months, I stopped thinking, stopped reasoning, stopped caring about consequences. Time moved differently after that. Moments blurred into days, and days blurred into something else entirely. I couldn't stop myself from wanting more, from finding excuses to be close to him, to breathe the same air, to exist in the same space where this unspoken connection had been simmering for far too long. But reality has a way of creeping back in, no matter how much you try to shut it out. It happened on a Sunday afternoon when the house was still and quiet. My husband had returned the night before, unaware of the shift in the air, the secret that had rooted itself beneath his own roof. He kissed my cheek as he left for a round of golf. His touch was familiar, his presence suddenly foreign. The guilt should have drowned me. It should have shattered the fragile world I had built, but it didn't, and that terrified me more than anything else. Tyler was in the living room when I walked in, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. He had always been able to read me too well, and I knew without him having to say it that he sensed my turmoil. "We can't keep doing this," I murmured, though the words felt hollow, weak. He studied me for a long moment before nodding, but there was no finality in his agreement. "I know." Silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of everything we couldn't say. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "Do you regret it?" I should have said yes. I should have used that moment to put an end to it, to erase what had happened before it could destroy everything. But when I turned to look at him, my answer was already written across my face. No. He nodded once, his jaw tightening. "Neither do I." And with that, the truth settled between us, unshakable. I didn't regret it. Not then. Maybe not ever. But knowing that didn't make it any easier because some choices don't come with clean endings. Some choices stay with you, haunting your every step, reminding you that once you've crossed a line, there's no going back, only forward into the unknown. That night, I had no clue it was going to turn into something way beyond just an ordinary evening. Leo's dad wanted him to go on his usual weekend business trip, but last minute I asked him to stay. A simple request, right? But deep down, I knew there was a quiet storm brewing inside him, maybe because it was building up inside me too. The morning felt off. I was making coffee in the kitchen, barely making a sound. Leo sat at the table, supposed to be doing his homework, but it was clear he was miles away. Then suddenly I turned to him and said, "Leo, can you hand me that coffee?" My voice was softer than usual, like I was holding back. There was this strange feeling inside me, but I made sure my eyes wouldn't give away anything. When he handed me the coffee, I held on to his hand just a bit longer than I should have. I looked at him like I was waiting for him to read between the lines. We stood there in silence for a second, and then I said, "Actually, since it's just us here today, there are some things I'd like to talk about. I'm usually calm, you know, but today something felt different. My gut never lies." "You're not a kid anymore, Leo." I started carefully, picking my words so there would be no secrets between us. "All right," my words seemed to hit him. "Margot, what's going on? Why are you talking like this?" he asked, clearly thrown off. I gave him a slight smile, but it wasn't warm. It was more like I was cracking open a riddle. "I was thinking about the space between us, Leo," I said softly. "Every day you're getting older, and it feels like there's something else between us, something shifting." I could tell his heart was racing now. He was probably feeling the same mess I was. "Margot, maybe you're just imagining things," he said, trying to laugh it off, but his smile was weak. I leaned in just a bit closer, lowering my voice. "But don't you feel it too, Leo?" "Something's changing between us, right?" I whispered almost like a breeze, soft but damn sure effective. He didn't have an answer. I knew he didn't know how to explain it. Things between us were starting to blur. "This is impossible, Margot," he finally said, breaking the silence. "You're my dad's wife." I moved a little closer and put my hand on his shoulder. "Leo, we're not hurting anyone. No one else has to understand this," I said, my voice calm but serious. I was unlocking something that had been hidden deep down. I could feel him getting more tangled up in his head, and yeah, I was too. Part of me knew this was messed up, but the other part, well, it was already gone. We just sat there for a bit, both of us quiet as hell, feeling the weight of it all. I reached over and touched the pillow next to him. "Leo, you know this isn't just a dream, right? This thing between us, it's real," I said, not breaking contact. He took a deep breath, turned his head, probably hoping his thoughts would just stop for a second. Whatever this was between us, felt wrong, impossible, but at the same time unavoidable. "Margot, people won't understand," he muttered. I gave him a slow smile, steady on him, not letting him look away. "People don't always have to understand, Leo. We just got to be honest with ourselves," I said. And that tension that pulled between us, it was getting harder and harder to ignore. I couldn't deny it. That night, everything shifted. The walls I'd put up were gone. Things would never be the same. It was dark and rainy that night. Each raindrop hitting the house felt like it echoed the conflict inside me. I'd lit the fireplace and pretended to read a book, but I could feel his eyes on me every now and then. Each step he took made my heart want to pull away, but damn it if I wasn't just as drawn to him. "Stay here till the storm eases up," I said, my voice calm but almost daring him. He sat in the chair by the fire, and the silence took over. We kept looking away, but we both knew there was something hanging there, thick in the air between us. "Leo, do you know how much you love this house?" I asked suddenly, my eyes glowing with old memories. He looked away, but I caught the smile he was trying to hide. "Of course, Margot. I grew up here. All my childhood's in these walls," he said. I kept talking, thoughtful. "I remember you sliding down those stairs every morning. Your dad would be having breakfast, and you'd just talk and talk, then run up to your room. None of us wanted things to change, right?" He nodded, but he couldn't hide from my eyes for a second. It felt like we'd gone back in time, reliving all those memories in this house. The more we talked, the more those buried feelings surfaced, bit by bit. "Sometimes I think we should have some kind of boundary between us, Leo," I said. "But then the thought of not seeing you again, that scares me." That hit him. I could tell. He looked at me, lost for words. We both had let our guard down, too exposed to take anything back now. "I get it, Margot. Sometimes when I'm with you, I don't know what to say, what to feel, but somehow I'm just glad to be here," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. His words lit me up inside. The firelight made the shadows dance across my face, pulling those emotions out of me. "Every time you're here, Leo, everything feels like it makes sense. Maybe this bond we have, it's deeper than we think," I murmured. We fell silent again. No more words left. We just sat there, weighed down by it all. The pull between us was like this gravity neither of us could escape, even if we knew we probably should. As the rain eased up, I placed my hand on his shoulder, gentle, lingering for a moment. We just let ourselves be in that space, our feelings hanging in the air. I tried to fight it, but with Leo next to me, those walls I'd built didn't stand a chance. When Leo's hand landed on my leg, this rush went through me like every feeling and mess we'd been holding back just came crashing out in that second. We lost ourselves, eyes caught in this pool neither of us had the words for. The only thing louder than the silence was my heartbeat ringing in my ears. "Margot," he murmured, his voice rough and low. It's not like we're in control here, is it?" My hand went over his, and I could barely speak past the knot in my throat. "Leo, you're my stepson," I said, but each word felt like it was tearing me up inside. It's wrong, but here, right now, I feel so damn lost." My eyes stung, but I couldn't pull away. I saw the same confusion and pull in his face. Leo's fingers pressed a little more firmly against my leg. "Margot, I won't lie. I don't want to stop this," he said, his voice breaking a little. "But every time I try to fight it, I end up right here back with you." Part of me wanted to let go, to pull away, but it was like his touch had me glued in place, caught at the edge of a line we both knew we shouldn't cross. I tried to push him back a bit, but my body wouldn't budge. "Leo, losing myself in this. Oh, it scares me," I said, but I was right there, leaning closer. "This isn't right, but somehow being here with you feels too damn real." I tried looking away, but I just couldn't. Whatever was between us was blurring every line of logic I had left. For a second, it was like the whole world had shrunk down to just this room, to just us. That heat I felt from him, the forbidden pull between us, had me sinking deeper, even as every part of me screamed to stop.